And here's another thing too with that, and this is what I'm super jazzed about, and so what I love about Ryan's record and all is that the decisions made at the moment. We're currently in a paradigm where we are trying to get so much information out of two speakers. We have found ourselves in a world where we chisel, hammer, carve, stomp on, smash, do whatever we can to get things to stand out and be present in a stereo world. In the immersive world, we do not need to do all of those things. As a matter of fact, the more you do it, the less space. We're going back to a point source in the middle of your head. When you start getting rid of dynamic range, on a stereo speaker, getting rid of dynamic range, it kind of comes forward and you go, yee, that's cool. It's in my face. And here's a bullhorn and awesome and whatever, but when you do this all the way around you, now the circle closes, ceiling comes down, everything comes in, and you're kind of getting back to this again. The opportunity here is to not use those techniques and to allow music, files, audio, everything to be as, open and dynamic as the song requires, as the artist intends, rather than, something that's just super flat because it's got to fit in because there's six guitar parts, and how are you going to hear all six of them unless you find a way that they all work? But if they all feel really good and they were written that way to have question and answer or arrangements or stacking and tones or whatever it happens to be, if we get rid of the things that make it music in the first place, we're now essentially going back to, to what a stereo a mix would be. And that gets rid of the opportunities of what comes from Atmos playback. So what I think is super cool, and again, back to Ryan again, is making an album in an Atmos release first. Let the stereo be second. Using the derived down to get to stereo, you're making different choices. Okay. Right now, we're in a world where we have stems. A common deliverable is stems, and the stems are coming from the parts that made up the stereo mix. But again, stem spreading is not mixing. You're taking stems that have been created with an intent to fit with other stems and just moving them around. And again, that's not the same awesome opportunity that we have if we do things bigger. So my suggestion is, mixing stereo at least simultaneously, if not after the Atmos file. When you're making you don't paint yourself into a corner and then wonder, how you're going to get to the door. Ryan, you got tons of wisdom on this too.
Well, I was going to say that exactly what you said. It's kind of an interesting thing, the difference between stereo and mono. Like nobody would take a stereo record, sum it to mono, and go, "Oh, there's the mono mix." You wouldn't do that. All the stuff on the sides would disappear. So it's the same thing. I mean, I know some people who are working very hard trying to do one mix, and I think that I salute them for doing that. But I agree with you that the stereo is definitely its own thing, and I especially agree with you in terms of the idea of using bus compression and all these things that we do to make stuff come out of little tiny speakers. It doesn't work in Atmos. Yeah. And although I will say that one of the hardest things to do in Atmos is to do a proper rock track, because a lot of times rock music is dependent upon that everything fighting for each other and that tension and all that stuff. So I would say the way that I've overcome that, at least in the kind of hard rocking tracks that I've done, is you just have to work a lot harder at the mix. And then those holes where the guitars show up, you got to jam them and use your faders to jam to plug those gaps. It's not like you can do the whole thing, run it through a compressor and go, you can make a few little adjustments. It just doesn't work that way. And it's not, and in the end, it's more satisfying. Like, for example, I think Into the Great Wide Open. It's a song I did, the Tom Petty song. And it has this thing, it goes da-da-dang, da-dang-dang, da-da-dang, da-dang-dang. It's this big kind of riff before the chorus. And it goes into the great wide open. Right. I remember on the Atmos mix, I just took that whole riff and I just like jammed it up like about 3 dB or something. And it's awesome. But but you have to work a little bit more to get it to feel that way.